Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and welcome back to Goose Junkies. We've been off the air for a while, but we decided to come back for a Halloween special for you all for our 31st episode. How appropriate! We want to look at two Halloween classics from two juggernauts, Goosebumps and The Haunting Hour. We're going to be facing off Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns versus The Haunting Hour's Pumpkinhead. I'm joined tonight with our usual panelists, Micah and BD. How are you two doing tonight?
Yo, 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 people, patrons, and pumpkins of the night. This mask is cutting off my voice. It's your boy, the Horrorlander, the horror hero. How y'all doing, people? First of all, I'm very excited for this episode because the fact that this podcast has been going on long enough that I'm with my brethren on Halloween with the boy King Noosme joining us is very, very cool. So thank you so much to the fandom, people who've been watching. We appreciate you. And Halloween is something very special. I know this because I went to my ex just a couple of days ago and I was asking her, yo, bruh, let's go to this Halloween party that I got planned out. And the first thing that she said after seeing me was, are you supposed to be dressed up as a useless, cheating bum? I had no costume on. I cried. I'm not going to lie to you, I cried. But anyway, her body might not be behind that. We can neither confirm or deny that. But listen, man, I'm hyped to talk about these two episodes because Pumpkinheads and Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns is very, very iconic in terms of kids horror. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this has been the number one most requested episode. So we hope you guys enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. How are you doing tonight, Micah?
I'm doing pretty good. Very excited to do this special, a little bittersweet having Halloween almost be over, but.
I know seasonal depression is about to kick in. I feel.
hmm
And then, of course, we have a special guest tonight. King Noosme has decided to join us. Unfortunately, he is currently in the process of doing some moving, so he has no camera, but he will be here in audio. How are you doing tonight, King
Yes,
Noosme?
I'm good. It's me. I swear, guys, it's me. I
The
decided to
ghost
go
of headless
faceless.
King Noosme.
People kept calling me the TF2 soldier too much, so I'm no longer showing my face.
And as usual, Spongy444, our resident panelist as well, has provided some writing for us to read off in the comparison. He's a good fifth person in these, or sometimes fourth, to kind of help break a tie. And he's also really good and very funny. If you're not following his blog, you need to go check him out, as well as these other guys. Go sub up the Ultimate Goosebumps, man. Go sum up the Horrorlander. And if you aren't already subbed to King Noosme, what are you doing? He's probably one of the biggest kids horror YouTubers on the platform. Go show him some support. Greatest thumbnails I've seen. So yeah, without further ado, we have some pretty tall standing Halloween classics here to talk about. So we have Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns, right? So Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns came out in what, 1996? In late 1996, around the time when season 2 was airing on Fox Kids Network here in the States, or YTV in Canada. And a little fun fact about Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns. Its book and episode released the same month, and I think actually within a few days or even a week from each other. So when the book came out, as well as the episode, kids got dual access almost immediately to it. And it became a cult phenomenon, it seems. And so many people over the years have said Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns is one of their favorite book covers. It's one of their favorite Halloween books ever. And it's one of their favorite monsters they remember from the TV show. As of recent years, Trick or Treat Studios made a mask of the Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns pumpkin heads. So you know that there's some relevance here. So Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns has a pretty big reputation. Now, does it live up to it? Let's discuss. So I'm gonna pass it over to whoever wants to take Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns first. We decided for this special, we're going to mainly focus on the episodes, but if we want to bring up the books and when we talk about the episode to compare it, or maybe just, bounce off, what we prefer in either one or which one we prefer, that's fine. So whoever wants to take it over, I'll give you the floor.
I can do Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns.
All right, Michael. So
Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns is centered around a pair of friends named Drew and Walker. Drew is a big fan of Halloween. She loves to just, trick or treat, dress up. She loves the whole holiday. And they realize that there's these two bullies out there named Tabitha and Lee, who are both they're almost like Chuck and Steve from the Haunted Mask books, where they're just kind of these bullies who like to pull pranks and try to scare people and just kind of ruin Halloween for everybody else just for their own amusement. And Drew and Walker, or mainly Drew, but Walker as well, have friends named Shane and Shauna, who in the episode I believe are kind of just back visiting in town again after being away for a while. I can't remember for sure, but basically they end up getting scared by Tabby and Lee at the beginning of the episode. And Shane and Shauna basically just tell Drew and Walker that, if you just let us handle it, you invite those two out to trick or treat with you guys, and we'll handle a way to scare them. And so things start happening. There's a lot of weird disappearances going on in the town where these adults are going missing. They don't know what's going on. Drew's parents are kind of freaked out and don't really want her to go trick or treating. But she convinces them it's going to be okay, that they're in a group. It's only been adults going missing. So her parents reluctantly let her go. And while they're out trick-or-treating, they encounter these two pumpkin-headed creatures who basically tell them to come with them and they'll take them to a better neighborhood to trick-or-treat. And they go there and basically all the people are really weird. They start handing out just giant bucketfuls of candy for all of them. And they realize, there's something off about it, but also they're getting so much candy that they don't care really. And you end up getting a reveal about what's with these jack-o'-lanterns and what their true intentions may be. And yeah, that's pretty much the main idea of Attack the Jack-o'-lanterns. Don't want to go too in-depth into it. But the episode is fun. I really overall enjoy it. There's definitely some flaws with it. But overall, I think it is a very entertaining episode. The Halloween atmosphere is amazing in here, especially in that alternate neighborhood they go to. It's loaded with decorations and just really awesome. It just looks really awesome and just screams Halloween when you see it. I think the jack-o'-lantern designs are really cool. They're very iconic. A little different from how they're described in the book, like giving them the crab claws for their hands is a very interesting touch, but it just kind of adds to that design and monster overall to me. I like most of the actors are pretty fine. I like Erica Luttrell as Drew. I think she does a good job with the role. Obviously, she wasn't amazing because she's a kid actor, and not a lot of the kid actors are very good in the show. But for what she had to work with, I think she was decently entertaining. Walker was okay. He kind of is on and off throughout the episode. He gets more grating as it goes on, in my opinion. He has some funny moments, though, like his whole bit about what his costume is when he's talking to Drew's dad. I like that little bit. That's a really fun bit. I think her parents are really good. Both the actors who play Drew's parents are really fun, especially the dad. He really just brings a lot of personality to that role, and I really like what he did with it. Tabitha and Lee are definitely the two weak points of the episode, though. They're definitely the worst actors of the group. They're very kind of annoying, especially Lee. Lee is probably the most obnoxious character in this episode. He's just not very good. And Shane and Shauna, they're okay for the little amount of screen time they have in the episode. They're not bad. The guy who plays Shane is the same guy who played one of the guys in Phantom of the Auditorium. Can't remember which character's name, but he's the same actor in there. And then, of course, you have the twist ending, which, again, I'm not going to give into the specific details of it, but that's probably my weakest point of the episode for me. While I like the idea of the twist, the execution is very goofy and just kind of ridiculous, especially with the creature effects that they use for it. You can kind of tell all the budget went into the jack-o'-lantern heads because the creature designs and the twist, you can tell had like no budget behind them. But overall, episode is solid. I probably give it like a 6.5 out of 10. There's some flaws to it, but overall, it's a very fun time that delivers on some good Halloween atmosphere.
Okay, solid thoughts. And that's a good way to start it. I'll say in line with what you said. I think Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns as an episode is really fun. I think, if anything, it proves to me one of two things. The first being my thoughts about the book. I didn't think the book needed to be as long as it was, because if you don't know, a good amount of the Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns book is spent on a flashback that the episode condenses into less than 10 minutes. And it's pretty well paced. And it just shows me that sometimes seeing is better than reading out and explicitly laying out what needs to be done in said scene. So while Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns is already a short book, I've always thought that it just needed to be a short story or maybe a triple header story and nothing more. I'm actually shocked that it got put in the original 62. But if you know the context behind the show was actively asking R.L. Stine to write episodes way in advance before they became books. So that way, when the books would come out, they would have an episode to release with it, and it was mutually beneficial. Whether that actually was the case or not, whether they were competing with each other or not, is another day's topic. But that was the idea. So Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns released the same time. And I wouldn't blame kids if they watched the episode and been like, why would I need to read the book? Because it's essentially the same thing. So there's not really much to really compare here. Maybe a few things about Walker's changed up here. Maybe some aspects with Tabitha and Lee, but it's basically the book minus like the final bits of the story, right? And to me, I've always thought the story was fun. It's kind of like Goosebumps meets Twilight Zone. You can definitely see that Rod Serling influence that Stein had in this story. And I think that does translate well into the episode where the Jack-o'-lanterns bring these kids into a foreign neighborhood they don't know about. That's like something Rod Serling would do. And they're stuck in this purgatory, so to speak, of just endlessly trick-or-treating. And there's the existential horror of being stuck in doing something that you are supposed to love but grow to hate it, right? You could see that theme in the story. And while that's really cool and rich, you have this weird subplot about adults going missing, right? So that kind of adds a layer of intrigue to the story, right? Where, you think about, why are these adults going missing? Like, what's exactly going on with that? And you get your answers. And I think it's more explicit in the episode where it definitely builds onto the the book's ending and makes it a little more memorable in a way. And I don't want to give too much away, but if you know the book, you know what I'm referring to. I thought this episode was like pretty on par with the book personally. I think both of them are kind of like a B tier Goosebumps story. There's some good stuff to be had, some good frights. I think the jack-o'-lanterns are iconic monsters. I actually like the plight in the story either way you go, especially when you're reading it through the lens of Drew and Drew's perspective in the book, or you see it happen. There is some humor to be had, and you can kind of laugh at the expense of what's going on because Tabitha and Lee are really awful characters, and it kind of helps in the episode, I think, because they're so badly acted. It kind of makes them easier to hate. So I think they do their job with what they're given. Not the worst acting I've seen in the show. The only things I think that really hold the episode back for being totally better than the book for me is that it just basically keeps all the sins that the book had. Just keeping the flashback scene. I kind of wish they took a whole different direction with the episode and did a complete different interpretation of the story, or maybe took an aspect and just ran with it a little more. But I will say the nightmare sequence was really good. It's probably the best aspect to the episode. And you're absolutely right. Whatever is revealed near the end of the episode looks god awful. I'm not gonna lie. Um, the pumpkin creatures look good. I like the added effects of having the mandible claws, or I think they're supposed to be vines or representing vines that look like it. I think that's a cool touch. I think Pumpkinheads from Haunting Hour did a similar thing, similar aesthetic. And I don't know if that's actually inspired from the Pumpkinhead movie, because I think they had that too in some aspects. But who knows? But yeah, those creature effects near the end weren't that good. And yeah, I mean, wholesale, the story just it doesn't quite hit the highs of a Goosebumps tale that I want to see. But yeah, like I said, it's like a B tier episode and books, and they're pretty much dead even to me. So I really don't have much of a preference for either one. So yeah, I'll pass it over to the next person who wants to throw their hat in the ring.
King, you want to take this one, or you want me to take it?
Well, they pretty much said everything I was going to say. It's an okay episode. I mean, it's kind of boring at the beginning to me. Like, nothing really happens. And, I mean, you have that nightmare sequence, which is pretty cool. It's the old people are kind of creepy, but old people are always creepy. But other than that, not much really happens. Even while they're trick or treating, they're just trick or treating, and like it's not really that scary to me. Or even as a kid, I found this episode super like goofy, a little wacky. I do like the pumpkin heads, of course. They're a cool costume. But before I rewatched it for this podcast, I completely forgot literally everything besides the twist ending in this episode. Like I forgot they went trick or treating. I thought the pumpkin heads were chasing them for some reason. Nope, that didn't happen. I don't know where I got that idea from. But yeah, the sock puppets are fun. I do like that. That's probably one of the best things about this episode. I love it. I love how goofy it is. But yeah, it's just kind of a mid episode. Honestly, I think it's so popular because the pumpkin heads are so like iconic looking, and the Goosebumps cover, you kind of see that everywhere. Like it's something I'd probably have a shirt of, honestly. My plethora of Goosebumps shirts. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, you have a good point there, King News Me. It's just really boring. Either in the book or the episode, like the flashback stuff is just nothing happens. It's
yeah,
all exposition to the story that you don't really need in that detail. I feel like you can tell the same story by getting into the action immediately and then dropping bits of the exposition throughout, and instead of just dumping it all at once.
yeah.
I hate
Or
it when movies do that or everything else, and this is like the only time in Goosebumps where I saw it ever to this extent.
yeah, I mean, if they spent more time with the Pumpkinhead people and like they were forcing them like more forcibly to trick or treat rather than just like no, keep going, keep trick or treating, then it'd probably be a little bit scarier. Like if they're like following them and like threatening them more with their little laser fingers and stuff or laser claws. I feel like just more of a threat rather than you know I don't know, just them being kind of lame and standing still and watching the kids trick or treat.
And the thing is, with the existential horror, you kind of need a character narrative to kind of help sell the existential horror, and I think that's what
Yeah,
they were going for. But it doesn't quite register the way it should because you don't see the characters, bonding with each other. You don't see much interaction. They're just, why are we trick or treating and panic and just being kids about it? And the
yeah,
story just needs a little nudge in the right direction to kind
yeah.
of make that be better, and it just doesn't have it.
Very lame. But
Yeah.
Horrorlander, your thoughts?
So I'm actually glad that you went before me because I think my thoughts more so align with yours. This is one that I know is a fan favorite episode because I've been seeing as the years go on, everybody kind of talks it up. And it is a Halloween episode, so I understand why. But overall, I thought it was above average and just a little bit above average. Reason is because the first 10 minutes to me of this episode are boring. It feels more in line with stuff you would see from Are You Afraid of the Dark, where I definitely thought that some of the dialogue, the acting, and the direction was more corny than I usually prefer. Walker was entertaining, but at the same time, he's got a lot of negative aura points. There's a lot of really goofy stuff involving him, like when Drew makes a joke about her dog having fleas. He's like, but my dog never had fleas. It's like, all right, bro. And then the whole thunderstorm costume was
God, that
funny
costume.
it was funny, but when I saw it, I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like that man was straight up a all black scorpion from Mortal Kombat. I didn't see what he was talking about. But the exposition was definitely a little bit forced. You're kind of the one weird thing about the episode is it opens up with an exposition dump. And usually when you watch episodes or you watch movies, they keep that towards the end to kind of intrigue you within the setting of the story. No, up front you get dumped with this information. So that kind of took me out of it. And I'm going to have an unpopular opinion. I think the dream sequence is actually pretty lame. I know. That's more so my taste, but the echoing inside of the house just felt a little bit too on the nose. The old people weren't too scary, especially the older man. And although the theme of what happens in that house plays into the climax, I can't help but feel that the house sequence is very random and just kind of loosely ties to the climax of the story. And also, when you watch episode adaptations from the show, or even if you watch, let's say, a Haunting Hour, Are You Afraid of the Dark, that has a lot of unique kids horror episodes, usually with the dream sequence, they kind of let you know that the character is going to sleep and going into a dream sequence. Usually, rarely do you get a fake out sequence in an actual episode compared to what you would a book. Here, it's a fake out sequence. I genuinely thought that we were going in some really weird direction with the episode, and next thing you know, it turned out to be all for nothing. So that first half of the episode is kind of weak for me. Now the second half, it's fun. I like the fake Halloween Town vibes with them going trick or treating in that brand new area. Easily the best part of the episode is, of course, none other than the jack o' lanterns. The designs of the monsters are really good, very iconic. And I actually do like the ending to the episode. I'm kind of with King Newsme. The sock puppets are kind of creepy in their own goofy way. And I think the main thing I like about the ending is the double fake out. The fact that Walker himself gets tricked by something going on with the plot, and then Drew gets faked out with something going on in the plot. And the ending is actually more sinister than I would have expected from such a goofy episode. And the sequel bait I thought was pretty good. So the good thing about the episode is, yeah, you get Goosebumps twists, but they're pretty well executed. They don't feel like they're too forced, like My Harriest Adventure or stuff like that. It actually does feel pretty feasible for the story. But there is a negative with the ending. I like the ending, but the ending takes away from the climax because you have no idea why the jack-o'-lanterns are doing what they're doing. It just kind of feels like a little bit of go-go gadget random bullshit. And I kind of agree with King there that, yeah, they're in this endless purgatory of trick-or-treating, but you don't really understand why that's happening because you find out what these creatures are and it doesn't really make any sense. The whole purgatory Twilight Zone thing. Their laser beam powers, the fire coming out of their head is cool, but it just feels random. And nothing happens inside of the trick or treating scene. They just keep trick or treating back and forth, and there's no real kind of message. There's no real reason why they're doing it, and you don't get it until the last moment of the episode. So overall, I'd give it a 7.3 out of 10. I think it's fun, but it's turn your brain off fun. And I definitely think that most of the fan favorite ratings just come from how iconic the monster designs are. So those are my thoughts.
I'm kind of glad that everybody seems to be kind of on the same page with me. I've always thought that Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns, without a shred of a doubt, has to be one of the most overrated stories in Goosebumps. If we're talking stories. Now, I think we've all kind of hinted at, that there is this endless purgatory and, they're just going around trick-or-treating. I already brought up the fact that what I think would have benefited the story more is if they just leaned into, a commentary, kind of like How I Learned to Fly, or if you have something to say with it, it makes it more enjoyable that way. They could have made it like, hey, every kid loves trick or treating, right? But what would make you hate trick or treating? What would make you hate something that you love if you had to keep doing it over and over and over again? It could be a commentary about going to work. You could find a career that you like, but if you do it every day and you're stuck with it, it starts to feel more like a job and you don't like it as much. They could have done something like that and made a commentary about it, made it more of an inflection. Possibly could have registered better.
I think building
But
off of what you said too,
yeah.
another thing that would have benefited is I think the origin of these jack-o'-lanterns could have been explained more and turned into something better. Because I definitely would have preferred if they were an actual Halloween entity or being, because that makes the whole purgatory thing work better. And you can throw in some more Halloween gimmicks. Maybe, they turn people into actual monsters. They do a bunch of different cool stuff. But the race of these creatures at the end kind of just derails everything and it turns into a more, gotcha twist. So I think that if you would have made it into like a recent movie that came out, Dark Harvest, have these jack-o'-lanterns actually be some Halloween creature entity, a pseudo deity thing, and you can actually make it into something more of a Halloween iconic episode, at least in my opinion.
I feel like if they like revealed something like the candy was actually like kids that they turned into candy or something to like really scare,
Yeah.
like oh, and if they don't keep trick or treating, they're gonna turn them into into candy. They're already kids.
And then you get a poof de fromage scene, except with candy. You just get thousands and thousands of pounds of candy breaking through people's houses. There you go.
Exactly. And they could even laser one of the kids. I know R.L. Stein doesn't kill kids, but you could laser one of them and then he turns into candy. And then that's pretty fucking terrifying. That'll
And
probably
that
scare a
way-
kid or two.
That way, kids can never eat a Twix bar the same way again. You don't know if
Exactly.
it's your uncle, bro.
You're going to be cannibal.
Speaking of R.L. Stein, I think people don't give enough credit to how jarring and sudden the dream sequence really is in the story. If you read the book, you'll see it too. you watch the episode, it's clear as day. They're in the flashback exposition for like a good solid 7 to 8 minutes, and then all of a sudden, it's a dream fake out.
Yes.
Yeah.
and just, but I remember reading that in the book, and I'm just like, holy crap, man! You have the gall to go this long with an exposition, like 50 to 60 pages of this, like what, 115 page book, and then you smack a dream sequence right in the middle. I learned something pretty intriguing about that. So there's a running gag where R.L. Stine, if he needs to add something to fluff out a scene or add something in to maybe represent a cover, he usually adds a dream sequence that gives it away. And somebody mentioned this on Reddit, saying that supposedly Stein added in the dream fake out in Attack of the Jack-O-Lanterns to make the story a bit longer, because he needed to make it longer.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
does seem that way.
It does
I mean,
seem that way. Because where
It
it's
just happens.
placed and everything, it just makes sense.
That's why it feels so weird too,
Yeah.
because again, most of the times in episodes when they do a dream sequence, they let you know the character is dreaming. Only in books do they do that whole thing where you read this entire chapter or two, and next thing you know, bam, it was worth nothing. No, they actually do it in this episode where you think that you're watching the plot. No, it's not a plot. It's one giant fake out, and that's a little bit jarring.
Yeah, at least with like in Say Cheese and Die, the dream sequence kind of highlights Greg's fear of the camera a bit and what it may do to people. And also it's a nice little tie into the cover.
And again, usually it's just like in addition to the story, like, hey man, you want to see how freaked out this kid is? You want to see some crazy foreshadowing? Throw it in. But no, you got this weird, loosely based dream sequence for 10 minutes. 10 minutes of a 20-minute episode. That's a little crazy.
Like I said, the episode keeps the sins of the book, which is very rare in the TV show, believe it or not. And most of the time, they actually did try to valiantly fix the sins. Sometimes they made their own. Sometimes they made their own, like Headless Ghost. Remember that travesty there?
Oh,
But
I like that episode.
more power to you.
well, I get it, but the whole painting stuff, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, most of the time they tried to fix it, but I guess because you got to look at it like this, How to Kill a Monster, The Blob That Ate Everyone, Calling All Creeps, Vampire Breath, they were trying to simultaneously release stuff at this time, and I'm guessing that they didn't have the hindsight abilities like they did in season 1 or with some of the older books to fix them, so they didn't know they needed to fix something. So this would have been a much interesting episode to me if it happened maybe in season 3 or 4, and we could have seen what they would have done differently. I'm assuming they would have definitely changed up some aspects to it if they could. And I think, and I wholeheartedly believe if that was the case, we wouldn't have gotten the episode we got, personally, given the track record of the show.
That's fair. I agree.
So with that being said, let's read Spongy's thoughts, and then we'll move on to Pumpkinhead.
All right, Sponge Meister, let's pull you up. Speaking of sponges, I did bring it up with the guys before we started this podcast, but yeah, man, that sock puppet scene towards the end. If you guys have seen that Halloween episode of SpongeBob where he takes off that ghost costume, y'all know what's up.
The hash slinging slasher.
That's not the same thing.
That's actually a different one.
Yeah, it's a
Oh, is that
different-
that one?
No, it's a different one. This
Thinking
one
that
is
What's
like
the sock puppet?
the sock puppet is he was a
He's
guitar
going to like a
player,
Halloween
right?
party, right, or something.
Yeah, he's a guitar player, right? Like he's playing or someone was playing the guitar coming down, and next thing you know, ghost costume gets taken off. So
Oh, and he wanted to be something scary, so Patrick was going to shave him so he could be round, so he can look like a ghost.
first of all,
But
and
he shaved a little too much
I
off the
remember that
top.
SpongeBob said, "Don't push my shit back," and he pushed it a little too far back
Pushed it down to the cranium and even farther.
to the medulla. All right, so let's get Sponge Meister. So this is a pretty ideal adaptation. It condenses all the padding and focuses mostly on the good stuff. The atmosphere is really good here, and I dig the effects, as goofy as they can be at times. It flows better. Erica Luttrell is solid as Drew, and the true form of aliens is just amazing. No notes, my man. It's a pretty solid and fun episode that does what it needs to in terms of honing on the best parts of the book and enhancing them. And he did do a book review as well, but we're not covering the book this time. So that's just his episode thoughts.
Okay, so I know Spongy prefers the episode over Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns, and since we're only covering the episode, I think we all are kind of on the same page that at least if you've read the book, you probably are in the similar wavelength. Like either it's a little bit better, or for Spongy, I guess it's considerably better. So with that out of the way, now we have Pumpkinhead, which is actually based on a short story from the short story collection, The Nightmare Hour, published by R.L. Stine, I think in 1999, and it was the first story in that collection.
That's some
Ironically,
sick
it took
artwork, too.
2 seasons to get put into the Haunting Hour television show. BD, you have something you want to add?
No, I was gonna say, I thought, well, I'll help out King Newsme. He said the artwork is great in that short story.
It's so
He's
cool.
right. Very cool.
Oh yeah, I just read this short story. I think for the second time, coming into the podcast because I wanted to see what they did differently in the Haunting Hour, because the Haunting Hour is notorious for this. They will look at the short story and be like, "We'll take the name and then we'll just loosely adapt it." This one is a little more faithful than I thought it would have been in terms of the episode. I guess I'll kick us off here. The story, instead of doing the short story where they had I think the kid's name was Andrew and Mike. Andrew was the main character. He's kind of like the Scott of the episode. And he has a good friend Liz, who's the crush of his younger brother, which is kind of weird.
Mike was more of the Scott. Mike was like the mischievous little brother.
Yeah, the younger brother is more.
The younger brother was the one that was kicking
in the
pumpkins and
short
stuff.
story.
The younger brother in the episode is Dave, right?
Yeah.
Dave, and Dave is more.
Yeah, so
behaved.
Mike is Dave and Andrew is Scott.
Scott. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You're talking about age-wise, I see. Never mind.
Yeah, but they added a new character in the episode, Allie, who's played by Casey Rawl. Casey Rawl was in a lot of things in the early 2010s that I recognize. I watched a movie called Geek Charming on Disney Channel. She's in that. She was in one of my favorite sci-fi movies ever. It's called Killer High, about a killer warthog mascot. She's the star of that movie. Pretty batshit wild. It's kind of like a Fear Street book almost. So I've seen her in a few things, and I think she was in another episode we've already covered.
She was in Wrong Number and Golem in the Haunting
Yeah,
Hour.
and Gollum
Wrong
Wrong Number.
Yeah.
Maybe you haven't covered on the podcast, but I've definitely seen her in some other episodes. And then you have the young Frankie, what's his last name? Jonas, Frankie Jonas, the younger Jonas brother.
The forgotten one.
Who supposedly, if you look into this, he had an allergic reaction on the set here, and it traumatized him. So, yeah, he doesn't. I don't know if he has good memories about it. This might be a good thing if you're out there and you like to interview celebrities that were on these type of shows. You should interview Frankie Jonas to see if maybe he'll be open to talk about it. But from what I've heard, it was kind of a mixed experience making this episode. And even I heard that there was studio meddling in trying to change the initial idea they wanted to do because they thought it would be too intense for television. And the original ending we were supposed to get did not happen. So this was another one of those proven cases where the network was too afraid to go all the way out there. But this is definitely one of those episodes that you can tell there's a technical ability here of actually knowing what horror is. It takes all the good textbook templates from slasher movies, like the good ones, and follows that stalker mentality. Literally, the villains of this episode act like Michael Myers. They're lurking, you feel their presence, but you don't know where they're at. There's some intrigue, but you don't know what's going on there. They actually pulled that off in a kid's show. Bravo. You succeeded in what the Halloween sequels usually fail to do almost every time. So, yeah, the story is simple. 3 siblings, at least in the episode. It's Halloween day. They want to go get some pumpkins. The older sister takes them to the pumpkin patch. But the guy who runs the patch might be unhinged, kind of mean. They enter a private part of the pumpkin patch, and they notice, in this version at least, there's a weird building and some like covered pumpkins outside of it, and they go inside and they see these scarecrows with like pumpkin heads, and they look like they're just, setting up mock-up scenes. Like I think the first one, you see one holding an axe about to like swing it at some of the others. Then you go into another room. There's literally a body strapped to a medical cart, whatever they call it, and you see the pumpkin head. That is like legit horror stuff, and the way it's lit too. I never thought about this episode this way, but this episode, it knows what it's doing, and it's actually making something frightening because it feels like it's straight out of a horror film. Well, of course, the kids, they get caught red-handed in the private patch. They're told to leave, but they grab some pumpkins, take them home with them, and they don't know that they possibly are being followed by something. They open up the pumpkins. One of them's contaminated with worms. The other one isn't. They decide to throw them away because they might be useless, and get ready to go trick-or-treating at their school, because in like the first 10 seconds of the episode, it just shows you a missing kid flyer, like, oh, kid went missing. So because kids are missing, they have to go to school to trick-or-treat. And the middle child, I guess Scott, who I think is kind of like half the main character of the story here.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I want to go get revenge on the farmer for trying to prank us about these pumpkins. Because I watched this 3 times to confirm. Scott legitimately believed that the farmer contaminated the pumpkins they got because they went to the private patch. And I'm just thinking in my head, bro, how would he have had time or the physics to do that? You know what I mean? Like, there's some things you got to use your brain for. But anyway, he sneaks off against his sister's wish. Sister does not want him to do that because it's unsafe to go out by yourself, especially when kids have been disappearing. Well, something might happen to Scott, and then we get caught up, and then we ultimately see what's going to happen at the pumpkin patch. And there's some reveals to be had there. I'm not going to go any further. So, yeah, if I haven't already said it, this episode is definitely one of the better technical made episodes. It definitely shows that the showrunners knew horror and had horror chops. Given the background history of the episode, this one possibly could have been a way higher heavy hitter if it had the original intended ending. Because I can tell you, after reading the short story, which you guys might be shocked with what I'm going to say here about that, but I think the short story's angle is way darker.
Yeah.
And I think conceptually, I see what they were trying to work around to try to make that adapted into the episode. But all they did was they kind of took it and almost ruined it because they try to blend the pumpkin aspect into this head. Mild spoiler, I guess I'll have to share this part about the short story. They're actual human heads that are just stuck to vines in the ground, like they've been cut off and attached to vines. This guy's deranged and a lunatic, and he's now forcing these kids' heads to be stuck to these pumpkin vines, which is completely warped. However, in the episode, they go from that to, decapitating kids to burying them in the ground, and what appears to be straight out of Full Moon Features, a half human, half pumpkin thing has already manifested out of the ground.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, not quite as good as the short story there, which is, I think, the hook point of the story. Like, all the tension builds up to this point in the reveal. It still works for what it is, but it's just not as good as the short story. I prefer the short story for that aspect. But I do think that it's competently made. Has some solid fall atmosphere going on. I think the pumpkin patch scenery was really good wherever they decided to film, and looked pretty believable. And I will say this: when Allie is in by herself at night at the pumpkin patch in that scarecrow room, that has to be one of the scariest things I think I've ever seen in Haunting Hour. When you see the pumpkin head with the doctor's mask and the blood on it, I'm like, there ain't no way they put blood on this mask and this apron, but there was blood on there. You can go back and check. It looks like blood. I'm like, holy crap. Haunting Hour, you wanted some respect there. I'd give this one like an A- for me. This is definitely pretty up there, pretty high up there in Haunting Hour in terms of like standards. Not quite a favorite, but I had a fun time, and I think it's great. I slightly prefer the short story, but that's just me. So I'll pass it over to whoever wants to take it next.
Guess I could go next. So this is one that I've always thought as like one of the scariest kids horror media ever. I mean, 3 episodes that always traumatized me from Haunting Hour as a kid because I was too young to grow up with Goosebumps. I often, watched a lot of rewatches, but I did grow up watching Haunting Hour weekly since its beginning until the end of season 3. So, Mascot, Dreamcatcher, and this one was always the ones that scared me. But this is the episode that I say, even as an adult, it'll still traumatize you and still make you check the dark corners wherever you're walking. This episode basically has a scary shit formula that runs the whole thing. You got stupid kids plus demon spawn jack-o'-lantern people equals bad stuff is going to happen. So, easily the best parts of this episode is the actual Pumpkinheads. The costume designers and makeup effect people who made these Pumpkinheads need a round of applause, a standing ovation. They are horrific looking. And while the short story to me leaves you feeling more uncomfortable and uneasy, I think the episode does a good job at making it flat out terrifying, flat out in your face scary. Because when they're going into this shed area of Farmer Palmer's pumpkin patch, it is straight up looks like a murder house. It looks like a murder warehouse. You got all these demonic looking pumpkin heads sitting on chairs. That whole operating table scene where they're basically about to rip that man open. It looks something out of a nightmare shop. And even the main characters comment on that. So that's all really well done. And when you get back to the house and you see this whole sort of what feels like a slasher movie sequence where, again, these kids are being followed and these pumpkinheads maybe not break into their house and try messing with them there. That's very scary because it's one thing to go to somebody's place and see some terrifying stuff, and it's another thing to have the sanctity of your home broken into by an actual threat. And I love the urban legend aspect of this town, seeing what's actually happening. You see how these urban legends are unfolding the mystery. I like the fact of paranoia being in the town, that people are getting scared of Halloween. They treat it like the day of reckoning for their kids, where your kids are going to go missing, some bad stuff might happen, and unfortunately, these guys are the next target. And I have to say, easily my favorite part of this entire episode is the climax. That scene of the pumpkin patch at night with the fog machine that they were pumping through the field is horrific. Seeing Allie walk through that terrifying set is amazing, and seeing the pumpkin heads in the background just creeping and walking and watching her is really horrifying stuff. And when she has to go back into the shed to look for Scott, and she has nothing but a flashlight in some found footage type of shit. It's not found footage style, but the way she's moving through is that kind of video game type of scene where she's just using her flashlight and then she sees that her brother has his entire costume put onto this Pumpkinhead is crazy because, although the direction that they went with the short story is a lot darker, the fact that a kid effectively gets decapitated and put up as a mannequin with that pumpkin head is some horrific stuff. And just seeing that surgeon about to operate on that previously put pumpkin head on top of that table is really well done. The only real drawbacks I have towards the episode is I do think the characters are very, very basic. I mean, that's something I noticed even as a kid, where they're very much carbon copy. They're very much cookie cutter. You don't have any real attraction or any real interest towards the kids. They're just sort of plot devices. And I do agree with Completionist a little bit. He brought up a point that there could have been more effort put into the set in terms of the town. It's a very mundane, darker shade of a town. A Haunting Hour is notorious for that, but you can see it in this episode. And I do have to say that I do need an alternate cut of that ending because what it seems like they wanted to do with the ending would have been a lot more sinister than what we got. But at the same time, I like the mystery cutoff point of the episode, especially involving Dave in that car. Pretty well done. And as for Frankie Jonas, I'm very sorry for the incident of you shitting on yourself at set. I hope everything is okay now, and I hope you've gotten past it. So I feel bad for the guy there. But overall, I give this episode a 9.5 out of 10. an A plus. It's great. It's scary. I don't think there's any episode scarier than this. And I think they took a lot of risk. Just the horror aspect that they took. And even when they open up that pumpkin and you see a tooth inside of it, you see worms inside of it. They hit body horror. They hit gross out. They hit actual jump scare horror. They hit atmosphere. They hit everything that you need to make something scary. So technically, this is a masterpiece. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing I want to add before I pass it over again is that one thing I think that kind of reminds me about Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns with this, to kind of add another negative with it, is that you clearly see that there is some sort of potential statement to be had, with the kids going missing. And this kind of plays into, mostly millennial parents these days, but parents' fears about kids, being abducted, or specifically on Halloween, having somebody mess with them, or kind of tamper with the holiday and make it unfun for kids or hard for kids to enjoy because of these harsh reality things that happen, right? And you think that the mom would be more involved with the story, and I feel like if the mom was more involved, this would have felt like a straight up horror film because if you would have just included her in the climax and have her see what's going on to her children, I feel like that the episode would have registered in a completely different lens in that traditional horror way, and I think that possibly would have been too dark. And I can see why they didn't want to go with even their intended ending, which, in case you don't know, they wanted all the kids to actually be shown to be taken over and be turned into pumpkin heads. But they thought that going that far with it would be too harsh for a kid young as Dave. So they pulled back a little bit and they just left him in the car. So even if they're afraid to do that, they definitely wouldn't have done the mom angle. But I definitely feel like there could have been something more creep in line with Creep Show, because in terms of haunting hour, this feels like this could be something I would see in Creep Show more than I would expect to see in Haunting Hour or Goosebumps if it just had that extra push to put it there. And I think if adding the mom there would have increased the emotions and the heartbreak and maybe making the ending a bit more mature and darker, this could have easily been a Creep Show segment. Call me crazy, but it would have worked as one. That's just my 2 cents, but that's kind of how I feel about the episode and the story in a nutshell. Is like I can appreciate them making the swings in kids horror to this extent, but if you're not going to swing the bat all the way, then don't try to swing for the fences and then let off the gas, when you're about to hit the ball. You know what I'm saying? But that's just how I feel about it.
I think one thing also to build off what you said before we just pass it up is I think it's also pretty cool that since you mentioned Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns, it is pretty interesting how the missing people aspect is in both, especially with this episode. Instead of it being adults like in Jack-o'-lanterns, it's kids, and I do like the kind of play where in the Jack-o'-lanterns episode, the kids are basically like, "Oh yeah, it's adults that went missing. We'll be okay, we'll be safe. Just let us be kids." And then the parents are like, "Okay." Compared to in the modern age, parents are a lot more, I guess, protective in that, right? They're like, we're just gonna get rid of this holiday. We're not gonna let you guys even risk being kidnapped. So I do like that duality between the two, especially for this comparison.
In the Pumpkinhead episode, it was kids going missing. That's like that's what makes it scarier.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Instead of it being adults, that they just kids instead.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Well, I was talking in terms of like story. They could have played on the theme of kids going missing and make it an inflection about parents' fears of their kids getting hurt on Halloween. And they could have made it kind of like an inflection onto the holiday itself. And what's happening to the kids is kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. Because parents tell you, hey, don't do stupid stuff. And what does Scott do? What does Scott do? The most stupid thing possible. Kids are going missing, and he makes himself believe that the farmer tampered the pumpkins, so he needs revenge. How dumb can you be, bud? But you do it. You do something really dumb, and then this what's happened to you. And ultimately, he caused what happens to him and his sister. So it's dark, but there could have just been more there with it. And like I said, if they would have went there, this would have registered like a full on adult creep show segment. I feel, and I think that would have been baller because that there's maybe one or two kids horror things I've ever seen that I would consider. Yeah, this could have been. You could have put this in a creep show film. I feel.
Yeah.
Although Scott was an idiot, I do got to give a shout out also to Drew and Walker from Jacklands. I forgot to mention this, but who the hell walks into a stranger's house just because they want to see her costume, bruh?
Yeah.
No hesitation. They walked in. They're like, you know what? Let's go to the old man's bedroom. What?
Yeah,
he loves
people are going
costumes.
missing around town. It's like, yeah, let's just walk into a stranger's house.
Hey, my 70-year-old husband, he loves seeing little kids in costumes. Go up to his bedroom real quick. Excuse me, sir? Stranger danger.
He likes him a little too much, you know what I mean?
A little too much. A little too much.
You just got to ask, where are your parents?
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, let's move it on to the next person. Whoever wants to take it over.
I can take it.
Yeah.
So I've made a video about it. This is like one of my top 5 haunting hour episodes now. It's so good. And it's also squeezed in between 2 other really incredible haunting hour ones. It's Flight and then Brush of Madness. So you got like 3 in a row that are just like top tier, kids horror. But like you guys said, this one did the stalking, it did like the horror just a lot better. Ever since they stepped foot on that pumpkin patch the first time, things get super tense. And you feel like somebody's like watching them and somebody's about to grab them at any moment and they could just be taken away. And it stays that way throughout the whole episode. And like they have the gross out with the worms and then the tooth and the pumpkin, which is really gross to me. I don't know about you guys. That kind of grossed me out even more. But I just don't understand how Scott is so blind to these Pumpkinhead dudes, because there's multiple times in the episode where they're so close to him, where if he just looked to the right barely, he would have gotten a glimpse of them, maybe a little bit. He's like so tunnel vision on everything he does all the time. It got on my nerves. But like that scene where they're in that makeshift barn, that's like one of the most tense scenes in the whole series. Like even I know Allie at the end was still, it was like a little less tense to me because I kind of already knew what was going on in there. But when they're going through and they see like all these pumpkin scarecrows holding knives, like one has one stabbed in its head and it's pulling it out, like that's crazy. And you can see like the genuine fear like on their face as they're going through this. Like they're too scared to walk through, but they're kind of just doing it to not seem like pussies. And so and yeah, like it's just crazy. The climax of it is absolutely insane. I think they did that really perfectly. And I think that the way that he wrote the book was good for reading it, and I think the way that they made the episode was good for watching it, because the Pumpkinhead creatures are not in the story like at all. That's like only an episode thing. But honestly, if they straight adapted the story into an episode, it would be kind of boring into like the last maybe 2 or 3 minutes, because nothing really happens. The kids they dick around in a pumpkin patch for most of the story, and they get kicked out. One kid gets jealous, goes back, and then the Pumpkinhead thing happens. But in the episode, it's a lot more tense the whole time because you have these things chasing after you, following you around, and like I said, you never know when they're gonna capture you. And then when they do, they're the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my life. and I don't want to I don't know if we're talking about Return of the Pumpkinheads, but they have like more. They're like they have like somewhat supernatural powers. Like they're a lot faster than humans, but they don't really show it in this episode. But in the second episode, they can like run really fast. So maybe that's how Scott didn't see them, because they're just
we treat Return like Voldemort. Don't mention it.
It's not terrible. It's not the best, but with the whole reveal with Scott at the end of the episode, I think that was just genius. I did not see that coming at all, and it like literally made my jaw drop, because I didn't grow up watching this. I just discovered the show recently. So that's like one of the craziest like twists in any Haunting Hour episodes, in my opinion, and like one of the most brutal twists. And I did see that in the second episode, what is his name? Oh my god, the little brother. Dave.
Dave.
Dave actually survives and like goes and tells the police about what happened. And that's like how. So he does make it, but Allie is still a little ambiguous. You don't know what happened to her. I'm guessing she died, but
The thing is about the Pumpkinhead episode and the short story to me, I guess this is another jab at it, I guess. It's like, I think the farmer guy is like a great villain. I think
yeah.
he's just evil for the sake of being evil, and sometimes that's all you need to be. But for the angle they're going with, especially in the episode, you kind of have to just ponder because there's a specific scene where you see his hand and he's got
Mhm.
those vine tendrils in his arm, and you're like, okay, how is this shit happening? All right, hold up. Is anybody going to ask the question here? How the fuck did he turn that kid's head into a pumpkin?
Yeah.
How, like what
I
is
think
causing this? Like
I think
there's
he
so many
is one of
things
those
that you
creatures.
want to know.
Yeah, I think I actually kind of like the hand scene because I think that with the short story, I said it about it when I read the short story for the first time, but the short story has a level of ambiguousness to it because it's kind of just a short story to make you feel uncomfortable. But I think I like the fact that he had the Pumpkinhead hand because it's implied, like King mentioned, that he's actually probably like the progenitor, the originator of the creatures, and that's how he's able to make these Pumpkinhead. So he's kind of like building an army in a sense.
Yeah.
So I like that aspect to it.
I don't
And
think
like in
he's
the
necessarily planning on doing anything with them. He's just collecting them, though.
yeah, because in the story he
Like,
calls them his babies.
yeah, he
Yeah.
calls them his babies. In the short story, he just seems like a psychotic maniac. He's just killing kids because they trespass on his property, and he puts them in his collection, and they mess around.
Yeah, I mean
So,
in the short
yeah.
story, the vines are their own sentient entities, so it's kind of more
Yeah.
so like it's a different creature. But I mean, with the way you said like babies, I mean it's kind of implied he's the one who's physically turning them in the episode. So
Yeah.
I don't
And
know,
like
maybe a mother aspect.
in the second episode, I know I keep bringing it up, but in his house, they have like furniture for the Pumpkinhead. So maybe he's growing his babies, so he's like less lonely in life. And that's like
Yeah.
his reason. And then these people are coming and ripping his babies out of the ground. And that's not. I wouldn't be too happy about that either.
Yeah, it could be like he's
So
like a mother aspect, trying to
yeah,
expand and stuff. So
See, this is a classic thing Haunting Hour would do with the sequel episodes. If the first episode lacked context, they would try their best to add the context in the sequel episode.
yeah,
Dead Bodies is a famous episode of this example where they're like, all right, how can we expand on how this stuff is happening? And like literally, they spend like the first half of Dead Bodies kind of explaining what exactly is going on a bit
yeah,
because you're so wrapped up in the story in the first one, you don't really pay attention to that stuff, but then afterwards you're probably thinking, okay, maybe I want to know this. And thankfully most of the time they try to build on it. In Return of the Pumpkinheads, I think, was the only other sequel episode they tried
yeah,
besides Dead Bodies.
yeah.
The
And
only
Those are kind of
problem-
really
are hated very much.
yeah. Well, the only problem is that Pumpkinhead and Dead Body were clearly meant to be like one like finished and done episodes, but people kind of they wanted to come up with some ideas, so they came up with sequel. Dead Body continues the story perfectly. It's pretty much just feels like another part of Dead Body, but Return to Pumpkinheads is unfortunately
Yeah.
dog shit. So they didn't do a
Completely
good
different
job with
path.
making it a sequel.
And
I think they made the sequel episodes because of the parent backlash for how dark the endings were for those original two episodes.
Because Dead Body has I mean, kind of like an urban legend that a lot of people were phoning in about it for it being, too dark because sympathetic main character got messed up. So
I remember because when this episode came out, I was like watching the Hub Network religiously at this point because I heard about the Haunting Hour, and I remember when I DVR'd this episode, and I went home to watch it immediately, and I as soon as I was done, I went on the internet, and like over the week, I was trying to see what people thought about this episode because I thought it was really good, and there was so many people complaining, like parents complained about this episode being too scary, like they thought that their kids were watching like a rated R horror film at one point. They're like, this is like pushing too far. And that's when all the things were like, hey lady, mom's out there, dad's out there, we could have went darker, but we actually pulled it back.
Yeah.
So don't come at us.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Wait, you talking about dead bodies or this episode?
I'm talking about this episode.
Oh, okay. I was about to say
Dead
they
Body
thought
had
Dead
the
Bodies
same
was
similar
dark, and
effect, but
they were okay
too.
with Dreamcatcher. What the hell?
No,
Oh,
but Dead Body,
I'm pretty sure they got flack too, but
yeah, no, Dead Body got phone calls though from parents. People were like, or not just parents, but people who are upset about what happens to the main character. So that's its
yeah, it
own
is.
thing.
It's like a sad. Yeah, you got tricked.
Yep.
Because kids have to have happy media all the time. You can't have some dark media for kids.
Yeah,
No, never.
horror having bad things happen to kids impossible. Can't happen.
What a shocker.
the only two episodes that I think would have warranted a sequel if they kept going would have been Dreamcatcher and Mascot because of the dark endings. I think those would have probably gotten them, but everything else.
I think Brush with Madness also could have got a sequel.
Brush with Madness had potential there too.
I think
Fear Never Knocks had a lot of potential for a follow up too.
Yeah, that one definitely should have had another one.
Yeah.
But I think Mascot would have done better if it had a prequel rather than a sequel, because like how Big Yellow got to the school. Because I think in another episode it's hinted that he's like a creature of like some kind of species that's around the area or something. Isn't that like a theory?
No, I remember. They said he's supposed to represent a marsupial creature that was an ancient inhabitant of the region. So he's a marsupial.
So like the origins of Mascot might have been something cool to see rather than a sequel where he's, I don't know, they're probably hunting him down to kill him or something, which would make me cry.
I think we talked about a little bit on our mascots. We won't go too deep into it, but we did talk about like it would have been way easier to make a prequel where they just, and I think it was planned that they were going to make a sequel. It was in the talks, but make it where it's like, a cult of the school. That's why they keep covering up for Big Yellow. It makes sense if they're all like worshiping him or something. So he could have done something with that.
Yeah. Also, I want to mention in the Pumpkinhead episode, it's like the pumpkin replaced Scott. Like the pumpkin head replaced Scott's head, and then Scott's head is the pumpkin growing on the vine, right? Mm-hmm. But in the next episode, it's like the parents, they like buried their body, and then they turned into the pumpkin heads at the end. So like,
you remember the hole that Scott fell down into? Remember the hole?
Yeah.
Where it fit like a human body like size? I think they were implying that the actual human body is being buried there.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I think it's just I think they just put his clothes on a pumpkin head creature.
No, because I have a theory that all the regular pumpkins you see in there are possibly like some of those pumpkins that are normal ones are victims. There's probably a dead bodies buried under, because if you see it, it's like a metamorphosis thing where the person slowly starts turning into the switch thing. So
they did find a tooth.
There's only why one of the pumpkins has a human tooth inside of it.
Yeah, and that's why Farmer Palmer, well, double entendre, he says, you're not quite ripe yet. He has to wait for you to become fertile and do whatever he does. Pause on that.
I can make you into a pumpkin pie.
Yeah, I also like the fact that he said, he goes to Scott of all people and says, your head's not ripe yet, because Scott's an idiot too. So double play there.
But he's 14. He's supposed to be free.
I know. Listen, hey,
14 years old.
There's a saying: you F around and you find out. You gotta learn the hard way.
That is true. That just confused me when I watched that. I was like, how did they turn to whole human body pumpkin? Because I thought they legit just ripped his head off and put that shit on a vine.
The short story made it clear that I think, what was the kid's name? I think his name was Mike.
Mike, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
His body was standing there, but they put a pumpkin on top of it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But his actual head was decapitated and attached to where the pumpkins go in the ground.
Yeah.
So, and he's gonna do something with the heads because he's psychotic.
Because the short story describes it as his head was growing from the vine.
Yeah.
And it's kind of implied that the same thing is going to happen to Andrew and Liz.
Yeah, and also like in the short story, they had a good atmosphere because there were scarecrows, but they were just like normal scarecrows. While here it seems like he has a bunch of scarecrows, but he uses it to like replace bodies. Because what I assume was the scarecrow bodies are what he's using for the mannequins. So who knows?
Yeah. One of those things, if you think about it too hard, it starts to not make sense. Yeah. But like the whole thing with the pumpkins, they pick up normal pumpkins, but one of them's implied that have a tooth in it, so that was once a human head, right? Well, if that was a human head and it's just a normal pumpkin, how do you explain the teenage bodied people with the vine arms and the pumpkin heads there? Like, what are those?
Yeah.
Like,
Success.
is there any difference? Or are those teenagers?
I'm guessing they're probably just meant to be like just like these sentient monsters that he uses to kill the kids.
Yeah, I
He just
think
like
I
dresses
think
them up in the clothes of his victims.
yeah, I think that the main difference to, I guess, chalk up any, there's going to be confusion, but to chalk up any difference is in the short story, Farmer Palmer has no powers. He's like
Yeah.
helping out this sentient creature that's in the ground, versus in the episode, it seems like he's some pumpkin god. Like he has a bunch of
Yeah.
different things that he can just do with people. So that's what it is.
The pumpkin like creatures, they might just be like dug up early because like the parents in the second one, I keep bringing it up. That's all I can think about right now. The parents in the second one, they dig them up out of the ground to take them to the hospital. Like that's going to help, and then they turn into the pumpkin heads. So maybe if they dig them up too early, then that they like rot quicker or something,
Oh
and
yeah,
they
you
turn
know
into
what?
these creatures.
You know what? Maybe or maybe the final version is what the creatures look like, and you have to go through like a I don't know, stasis state where they're just normal pumpkins at one point. I don't know. Could
Well,
be
the
something.
parents just turned immediately. Like they put them in the car, and then they were pumpkin heads.
Listen, man, you bring up that sequel one more time, we're gonna box. All right,
It's
you
my
keep that
favorite
sequel.
episode,
You,
number
you keep
one.
that sequel favorite. All right, you know what? We don't got time. I'm gonna go with Sam's favorite. Okay,
I kicked out of the Discord server.
I'm about to
Join
get
the
booted from this
Pumpkinhead.
call
What?
right now.
No, I'm just joking.
Okay, cool. All right,
Like
Micah.
simply Colin ranking that over the original.
Like original ass return goated. 10 out of
Goated.
10. Best
All
episode.
right, Michael,
Here's-
before we hog up your time, what's your thoughts? Give us brief thoughts.
Oh yeah, my fault.
So yeah, this is, I know, as I feel like it's very stereotypical to say this, but this is my favorite episode of Haunting Hour. I don't know, I just think that it's easily the one that leans the most into the horror elements of the show. Like this, again, as you guys have all mentioned, it feels like an adult horror movie. Like it feels like they're, these guys were just like, okay, we want to scare the shit out of kids. So like, what do we got for that? And they succeeded because it terrified me as a kid when I saw it. I think that the practical effects of the Pumpkinhead creatures look amazing. Like they do such a good job with those effects. I think the atmosphere is really well done and just so eerie, especially like the smoke, like the fog and the pumpkin patch. And of course the shed with all the Pumpkinhead creatures is so tense and creepy. And just like, imagine coming across that yourself and like how you would feel and that would be like in the moment. And also the fact that this episode I don't know if this is the first episode of Haunting Hour to do this, but it had the balls to just straight up kill kids. Like they weren't afraid to kill these characters, which I think is something that, most kids horror doesn't really like to veer into. I know Haunting Hour does it a few times throughout the season with like Dreamcatcher and a few other ones. But I think this is one of the few times where you basically have confirmed deaths, because in Dreamcatcher, it's very kind of, with Meg at the end, it's very ambiguous about what's going to happen to her. She's probably screwed, but like, it doesn't show it. This episode, you're flat out showing like, yeah, these kids are dead. Like,
yeah.
And I think that just really makes it more effective, in my opinion. I think Palmer is a really creepy villain, and he's very odd, and that just makes him so uncomfortable. It kind of has this stranger danger kind of feel to him, especially because in the episode, it's a completely private patch. It's not like in the short story where it's like a public pumpkin field you can go to. In the episode, it's just a private patch, which I think just makes it a lot creepier with how he behaves towards people who trespass and things like that. And I don't know, I think there are really good elements of the short story. I do think the short story is very good and is a pretty close tie to the episode. I like both pretty evenly. But I just think the episode overall is a bit more, I like the horror elements more in the episode than the short story, because the short story is a bit more of a slow burn. It's kind of a build up to this ultimate climax, which again, as King Newsme mentioned, it would not be a very great way to just straight up adapt that into an episode, because the episode would just kind of get boring until the last couple of minutes. So I think they definitely made the right move with the adaptation. And yeah, I just think overall this episode is easily my favorite. It's just, while the kids are really annoying for the most part, except for Dave. Dave is great. But I don't know. I think the episode overall is just, in my opinion, a perfect Haunting Hour episode, and I give it 10 out of 10. So.
You know what I think? I often say this, but I actually genuinely mean it in this scenario. If you keep everything about the episode as is, except the final 8 minutes, and you kind of you start to add on bits from the short story, and you kind of blend them,
Mm-hmm.
You have the perfect package there.
I do think if they made the pumpkin patch public and they had Scott like dicking around, kind of like Mike did in the short story, to give Palmer kind of a reason to not like him on top of them sneaking onto his pumpkin patch, that probably would have been a lot better. Also, in the short story, they do make Palmer seem creepier. He's like got like a stiff walk and he's got like a creepy stare and stuff. So like
You also got the creepy aspect of the short story where because it's a public pumpkin patch, you can get the sense that he's kind of looking for victims because when
Yeah.
it's private, you don't know how he's acquiring these people outside of maybe trespassing kids or he goes and finds them. The pumpkin patch, if it's public, it seems like he's in the back just scouting out people and using that as part of his operation. So you got that.
just what like they kind of hint towards him watching everybody.
Yep.
Yeah, I think mainly in the short story, he like chooses the people specifically who break into his private patch.
Yeah.
That are
And they
those
kept
are like
that
definite
aspect.
ones.
They kept that aspect in the episode, and like he even gave, at least in the episode, he gave him a warning. Said, "Get out of here.
Yeah.
Don't come back." They came back because it wouldn't be a horror story without them making a dumb choice. But
well, to be fair, Scott was kidnapped, so
yeah,
he didn't come back by choice.
Because Scott stole the pumpkin. If he wouldn't have
Yeah.
stole the pumpkin, he would have let him go. So
Yeah.
So let's get into Spongy's thoughts, and then we'll say who wins.
all right, back to the Sponge Meister. I think it is, while I'm pulling up Spongy, I think it is pretty cool that this is one of the adaptations in The Haunting Hour where the short story is pretty much like a to the point thing and the episode is just expanding it. So I like the fact they did take a little bit of a more faithful route and just expanded it. So, Pumpkinhead episode by Spongy. It's about the same as the short story quality, concept-wise, but it feels a bit weaker due to being stretched out. It's nothing special story-wise, which worked better for the short story format. The Pumpkinheads are more active, which is cool, and the ending is still effective. I like the new lead as well, and the acting is decent. It could have done more to the story to make it more impactful as an episode. I feel the strengths come from the short story more than what they added. As it is, it's good, but nothing too special when it comes to Haunting Hour, especially season 2. Halloween factor could be stronger too. Also, a fact from my Eric Patterson interview: the ending was gonna have the Pumpkinheads get everybody, but the execs stepped in and they compromised, so Dave was spared. Still gets an ambiguous ending. Also, zombie Justin Bieber. Yeah, Zombie Bieber was crazy.
Oh yeah, I
hated that shit.
I didn't bring that up, but I was like, "Good God, zombie!" I forgot that was in the episode, and when I saw his costume, I was like, "Dude."
It was one
I
of
had to
those
remind
things
myself what time period this movie came, that show came out of.
It was one of those things that I giggled, but I felt so guilty about giggling. I'm like, man.
Each episode had a bad costume. You had Stormy Night and Zombie Justin Bieber.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I'd take zombie Justin Bieber over Bill and Ted from Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh my god.
Unexpected Visitor.
Oh, Unexpected Visitor. Jesus, that's a whole story for itself.
Right on, dude. Would you rather deal with that or just zombie Justin Bieber?
Hey, which is better? The jack-o'-lanterns, the pumpkinheads, or those glowing aliens? A tough pick, y'all. Tough pick.
Pumpkinheads for sure.
And it's funny. It's funny to me that Stein wasn't done with pumpkin stories because, after Pumpkinhead, it seemed like he was never going to write another one. But all the way in Most Wanted, in a Haunted Mask book, he makes Devin's story, which is essentially a remake of Pumpkinhead, but kind of blending it with Scarecrow Walks at Midnight. But it's not quite what you think it is. It's not quite what you think it is, and that's probably the worst part about it. But yeah, so like there is another pumpkin story out there if you're out there looking for another Stein one. It's in one of the Haunted Mask if you want to try it. Most people don't seem to like it, but have at it. With that out the way, I think it's pretty easy to gauge who wins here. I don't know if Spongy clearly said a victor, but I think he said in terms of episodes he likes Attack of the Jack-O'-Lanterns.
Yes, he said that book wise, Short story versus book. Short story wins, but episode-wise, Jack-o'-lanterns he likes more.
Really?
Okay. King Newsme, where are you at with this?
Return of the Pumpkinheads is kind of goated.
One more time. You get one more attempt. Bro. One more
No,
attempt. Bro.
Pumpkinheads for sure for me. I found Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns kind of underwhelming. So, but Pumpkinheads had really shocked me, and I still, if it was a little bit more gory, I guess it could definitely be like an adult horror movie. Like it's top of the line, good shit.
Yeah, for sure. Micah, I know this is comparing your favorite episode to something that you gave a 6.5, but I'm assuming that Return of the Pumpkinheads wins. I'm kidding. Pumpkinhead.
Yes, Pumpkinhead.
All right, and BD, where are you at with it?
Is the grass green? Is the sky blue? Is my ex toxic? Pumpkinheads win.
Pumpkinheads win, and yeah, it's a clear victory. I think on this one, in every way. I think Pumpkinhead, even the short story, it just takes the concept of a jack-o'-lantern type villain, or I guess the Lance Henriksen idea of a Pumpkinhead villain, and just makes it cooler. The concept of it actually being in a pumpkin patch and not just being out on Halloween trick or treating. You get rid of the jack o' lantern aspect, but you still got the pumpkin features going on, and the pumpkin creature in the aspect of somebody taking you and making you a part of a collection or using your body parts as decorations. That's just warped in
Yeah.
either version of the story you go into. And I have to say, in terms of kids horror, that episode, they had some great chops. And shout outs to Eric Patterson and Jessica Scott, who did the adaptation for the story. I don't know if they had a heavy hand in it or if it was series regular Neil Fernley. Neil Fernley directed a lot of bangers and a couple of bad ones, but he brought something to this episode that really made it pop. And all the things, I think Spongy is kind of half right, half wrong with what he said. All the things that the episode adds, it makes it scarier. It makes it more intriguing. And like I said, they managed to pull off how Michael Myers felt in that original Halloween 78 movie that none of the other movies since then have been able to recapture. And that is feeling that their presence is looming, but not seeing them. Like you can feel that they're there.
Yeah.
Watching, waiting, and you can feel that tension within you. And that's something that's super hard to be pulled off. And they pulled it off in a low budget kids horror show. I have to commend that. I have to give them the props where it's deserved. Fantastic episode.
Yeah, and also like just the fact like you kind of knew you were in for like a scary episode because I remember I don't know if it did that way on the streaming stuff, but I know on the hub when it premiered, it had warnings saying like this episode may be too scary for younger kids and you may need to watch it as an adult after every commercial segment before it came back on.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Was it just for this episode?
Yeah, just for they may have been for some other ones, but I know specifically Pumpkinhead had that.
Yeah, it's probably just for that one because I know with most other Haunting Hour episodes, it's just in the beginning, the disclaimer. They don't do it after each commercial. So
Yeah, so that's our Halloween special, y'all. But because we've been doing this for 31 episodes, actually a little bit longer because we did a couple of specials here and there as well, to honor 1 whole year of Goosejunkies, y'all. We've done a lot. I just want to pass this around very, very quick. Each one of us are going to pick a hypothetical face-off, and then we're just going to say out loud which ones we think is the best, and that's going to be our next episode when we come back for episode 32. We might come back for a holiday special before, so this might be actually episode 33, but I'm going to pass it around. Micah, do you have a specific face-off you want to do?
I mean, I think I mentioned this in a few private chats, and it's not Goosebumps, but it's other kids' horror. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark short stories versus their movie adaptations.
Okay. Great pick. BD, what do you want to see done?
My pick is going to be 2 movies being faced off. Haunting Hours, Don't Think About It versus a lesser known one, Crybaby Lane.
Oh, I want to see that one too. You know, I forgot that I wanted to do that, but that would be awesome to do because it's still Halloween. I don't know, but I would think one that we haven't done, right? And I've been kind of saving this one because I know how similar they are and how we've been kind of pushing it off. But I think calling all creeps and alien candy should finally be on the docket because if you know the stories and you know the episodes, they're very, very, very similar. And just for fun, King Newsme, if you had to come back for a future, guest panelist position, what would you want to see us face off?
Well, if I come back in November, we have to do something festive. So I was thinking the companion from Creepshow, and then maybe like there's a Tales of the Crypt episode called Four Sided Triangle that's also Scarecrow related. Maybe those two.
You
They're
want to do an
vastly
adult
different.
horror special? Okay, so Scarecrow horror.
I'm trying to
Okay.
get old up in
Four-sided
here.
triangle.
like
Four-sided
that'd be-
triangle. BD, you remember that episode, right?
I wish I didn't.
What?
Yeah.
Or we
Oh,
can
boy.
do actually we can
Okay.
do the haunting hour Scarecrow in the companion if you guys.
Or yeah.
That's
let's
it.
see.
We actually could because the companion first originated in a kids' horror book where authors wrote with their kids to write scary stories. So I'll allow that. We
Yeah,
can do
I didn't know
companion
that.
versus
because I don't know if four-sided triangle should be counted as kids horror. So yeah, we'll do Scarecrow.
Oh, it is definitely not. I didn't think about the kids part.
Yeah, sorry. There's kids in it, not the type of kids you want to think about.
No, not the good kind.
All right. So I know we all loved our own suggestions, but running around, if you had to pick one other than yourself, which one would you pick?
Alien candy versus calling all creeps.
Okay.
I'm gonna do Alien Candy versus Calling All Creeps. It's good.
Alien candy versus calling all creeps. It is, I guess. And
I was gonna say scary stories.
scary
Like that would be
stories.
really
Okay.
fun.
Yeah.
I was going to do actually the Scarecrow and the Companion. So, because I like that idea. Actually, I'll go ahead and throw BD a bone as well. I would love to do Crybaby Lane and don't think about it as a movie special, but we have a whole other season. We're going to probably do another 15 episode stretch when we come back. So we're going to, stretch out our legs and, get right into it. But I guess our next episode when we come back is going to be Alien Candy and Calling All Creeps. If we do decide to come back for the holidays and King Newsme would like to join, maybe we can
Oh, I'll do it. I love
accommodate and
Scarecrow.
still do the Companion and Scarecrow.
Scarecrow
That would
is
be a
my
good
favorite
episode.
haunting hour episode, so I would love to do that one.
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm going to put everybody's information on here on YouTube where you can find their pages at King Newsme's channel, the Horrorlanders channel, and Ultimate Goosebumps Man. Like I said before, all their channel information is going to be in the comment section and in the description in this video. If you've made it through the whole video, we really do appreciate it. If you like this podcast series, please, check out the playlist where we have all the Goosejunkies episodes available there for your listening and for your watching, if you like watching us as well. If you are a supporter of all of us, or maybe you just love the podcast, feel free to hit that subscribe bell. It's completely free to do so, and you can check out whenever we upload the newest episode. Normally, when we do upload on a normal season circuit, we are once a week, and we try to be on the same day, but sometimes, there's some carryover or we have to reschedule, and that does happen, especially when you're working with like 4 or 5 people on a panel. And I also will put Spongy's information in the description as well. You can go find his blog, A Taste of Spongy. You can find his Twitter, and he has some other places like DeviantArt and the wiki forums you can find him at as well. Until next time, have a great holiday season, y'all. We'll be thinking about you. If for all you out there going to school right now in the fall semester leading into winter, thinking about you. I was there with you at one point when I was grinding through school. Fall semester sucks, but at least when it ends, you got a big holiday break until January, and then you got to restart all over again, sadly. But I'm thinking of you. Thinking of you. And we'll see y'all next time. Take care, everyone.
Happy
Bye.
Halloween, people.
Yeah.